One of the hallmarks of our consumerist societies is the proliferation of luxury brands. Advertisers cajole us into wanting to climb into our Ferrari or Maserati motor cars, wearing our Hugo Boss suits or Jimmy Choo shoes, with our Louis Vuitton luggage in the boot. With a quick glance at our Rolex watch and a flick of our Thomas Pink cufflinks, we head off into a world that for most of us will remain a pipe dream. But how different is it to manage one of these luxury brands? As we ask that question, let's not forget that luxury motor cars account for just 12% of the volume, but 50% of the profits of the entire automotive industry. Jeremy Nell is an expert in this area, running a brand building company called, quite simply, Luxury Brands. Jeremy Nell, hello and welcome.
Thank you.
Positioning a $1 million motor car must be somewhat different from a payday special on 4 dozen tins of baked beans.
Exactly. Exactly. I think because one of the biggest differences is with $1 million luxury motor vehicle, you're positioning an experience, you're not positioning a brand. The brand is all about the intrinsics of the experience, but essentially what you're doing is you're taking a set of nuts and bolts and you're screwing that all together, you're packaging it together with an experience, and the proliferation of those products into the market determines exactly how you're going to position those brands to a very select small target market. The principles at play when marketing a luxury brand are considerably different from an entry-level brand in terms of unpacking the idea of what is the experience, who's it going to be targeted to, what is the price point, and how to deliver on that desirability for the brand.
I want to come back to that in a moment, but before we do, the way we use the word luxury, does it mean the same thing to you as it does to me?
Well, it probably would mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Luxury in the top end of the sector is you get aspirational luxury, you get desirable luxury, and then you get supreme luxury. And the top end of the market, luxury is basically all about the attributes that go together with a luxury brand. That's the price point, the desirability, the celebrity endorsement, all those elements that go towards positioning a brand as ultimately desirable, as opposed to a brand that is perhaps just trading up from a brand positioning aspect.
So how do advertisers tap into this? How do they create what's the right word? Is it lust in we consumers?
There's two things. One is supply and demand, and the other is price point. Obviously, the qualities, the intrinsics of the brand have to consistently deliver across all parallels on the brand. But it's essentially the price point of the brand and that would create the desirability, and also supply and demand. The one brand that is slightly been a bit of an anomaly for me over the years has been Moët champagne. Because you'll find a brand like Cristal, you'll find a brand like Dom Perignon. Those brands are, you play hide and seek to get them. Dom Perignon is quite visible in the market, and so a lot of people can potentially get access to it. So that brand is almost a trade up from your local MCCs, etc. But it still holds an enormous amount of brand cachet. And I think that would be a very interesting anomaly to have a look at. Whereas, you know, in the context of a luxury brand, it's very visible, but it is still a quintessential luxury brand.
But the utility value of these things, I mean, the difference between a wristwatch costing tens of thousands of dollars and a cheapo piece of Japanese plastic, they both tell the time.
They both tell the time, but they tell a completely different story. I think it is Patek Philippe watches that say that you don't own one, you steward one for the next generation. So I think those sort of elements basically says to you have a timepiece that's crafted by hand, that is not going to let you down, and that is going to be there for generations to come. Whereas if you want to call it inferior brands, tell the time, but you're not too sure whether that's going to be there for the next generation.
So is this a statement from the timepiece to me, or is it a statement from me to my friends? Am I flaunting it? And if I can't flaunt it, is it truly luxury?
I think a lot of luxury brands is an extension of a personality. It's what you would like to present, what you would like to project. And that's why those brands, they are very careful in terms of how they manage the brand message, in terms of what is the brand saying about you. What does it say? Are you brash and new money? Are you very much towards the old school kind of luxury, where you might find a pair of shoes that are handmade in London that have the maker's name perhaps on the side of the sole? Nobody knows about it. You and your friends that are in the know will know that those are specifically handcrafted for you, tailored by a specific cobbler for you, and that's almost the next level of luxury, where you're actually moving away from the brand and you're moving towards more products that are bespoke and handcrafted that actually don't say too much about yourself, because it's almost you past that. It's more the mature state of luxury as opposed to the emerging luxury.
But you make the point that I may not be able to afford $1 million for a Maserati, but I can afford a couple of $100 for a very fancy bottle of booze.
Exactly, and that's why the alcohol sector is one of the sectors that's fastest growing, specifically into the emerging African markets, because you'll find that it's relatively easy. People can run that through an expense account as well, so it's not necessarily your hard-earned cash that you're parting with to buy yourself a motor vehicle. It's part of your potentially your company expense, and I think that's why. Also, prior to the recession, you found that restaurants, wine brands, etc., were pushing their prices up considerably because people were spending on corporate money to be able to afford that lifestyle. And unfortunately, when the recession came, the first thing everybody did was say corporate spending is out the window. And it left the alcohol brands with a huge dilemma, because they'd basically extrapolated their price point to a position where they felt that the market could cope with that. And that was relatively artificial through the expense accounts. All of a sudden, when the recession hit out of the blue, those brands couldn't just discount their price points enormously. So they had to find really interesting and creative ways to accommodate that artificial price point that they'd actually raised. So you would find, I won't name any brands, but you'd find some case in point where all of a sudden, if you're flying first class in the airline, you would potentially get champagnes that were previously unattainable being served to you in a first class environment. So what that meant is that the brand didn't discount itself in terms of price. They perhaps did discount themselves in terms of the value offer that they gave to the airline, but you were enjoying it in a 5-star environment, you were enjoying it in a first-class lounge, so you didn't have any idea of the fact that the brand had been relatively massively discounted. And so from that point of view, the brand took the view, are we going to discount our brand, or are we going to just absorb the price differential ourselves, but yet make sure that we can supply our product into these markets and wait for the recession to dissolve itself, and then they can get back into the market again without losing their brand equity.
Final question, what are the key things to remember if you aspire to manage a luxury brand?
Attention to detail. Attention to detail, understanding your market, understanding your consumer, and being in a position to hopefully walk the talk at all times. I think it's a very difficult proposition to come into a luxury brand environment and to not understand the intrinsics and the buying behavior of your market, because the buying behavior of the market is extremely different to the buying behavior of, call it a more commercially based product. So I think understanding your market and absolute attention to detail, and then last and is delivery.
Jeremy Nell, thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Chris.